Welcome to Module 3. In Module 3, we will discuss access to entry point services. As a reminder, coordinated entry has 4 core elements: access, assessment, prioritization, and referral. This diagram from HUD's Coordinated Entry Guidebook demonstrates how coordinated entry's core elements might relate to one another. Access, the engagement point for persons experiencing a housing crisis, could look and function differently depending on the specific community. Persons, families, single adults, youth, might initially access the crisis response system by calling a crisis hotline or other information and referral resource, walking into an access point facility, or being engaged through outreach efforts. Upon initial access, COC providers associated with coordinated entry likely will begin assessing the person's housing needs, preferences, and vulnerability. This coordinated entry element is referred to as assessment. It is progressive, that is, potentially multiple layers of sequential information gathering occurring at various phases in the coordinated entry process for different purposes by one or more staff. During assessment, the person's needs and level of vulnerability may be documented for purposes of determining prioritization. Prioritization helps the COC manage its inventory of community housing resources and services, ensuring that those persons with the greatest need and vulnerability receive the supports they need to resolve their housing crisis. The final element is referral. Persons are referred to available COC housing resources and services in accordance with the COC's documented prioritization guidelines. We will cover all aspects of Entry Point, the coordinated entry system for suburban Cook County, in subsequent modules, but this module will go into greater detail about how households experiencing a housing crisis can access services in suburban Cook County. In 2016, after months of visioning, Suburban Cook County COC published its proposed flow diagram of how households experiencing housing crisis would access services through its coordinated entry system. In Suburban Cook County, households can access services through 4 main access locations: the Suburban Cook Call Center, 4 walk-in centers, multiple shelters and shelter day centers, and through interactions with street outreach workers. Workers at all access locations are trained to connect households to resources. However, each access location is slightly better suited for particular needs. It is helpful for our system to communicate widely how households can best access resources in order to be most efficient. For households facing eviction or otherwise at risk of becoming homeless, or households experiencing homelessness but not already connected to homeless crisis services, they can call the Suburban Cook Call Center, where households can call the call center during hours of operation and talk with trained intake specialists who will assess their need to connect them with appropriate resources that match the household's severity of need. They can also go to any of the Entry Point walk-in centers. There are 4 walk-in centers that are geographically located throughout suburban Cook County. Similar screening occurs as through the call center, but it may be possible for a household to meet with a case manager on the same day instead of waiting for a later appointment. If the household is at risk of becoming homeless and based upon their level of need, they may be given information about community resources, offered a stability case management appointment, or referred to a homeless prevention case manager. In many instances, households presenting with this level of need are able to resolve their housing crisis with minimal intervention. If a household is literally homeless and not yet connected with homeless services, the intake specialist will offer a diversion case management appointment when appropriate and/or provide the household with information about shelter or connect them with a street outreach worker. For literally homeless households working with homeless service providers, there's emergency overnight shelters and their daytime support centers, where staff are trained to resolve immediate safety and shelter needs and then help households develop longer-term housing solutions. Households are assessed and matched with resources based upon the severity of need and may include minimal interventions such as reconnecting with family members or short-term financial assistance, or, if necessary, may include more intensive interventions such as longer-term financial assistance and ongoing supportive case management. There's also street outreach, where some households choose, for various reasons, not to engage with emergency shelter. Therefore, street outreach workers are available in the community to meet with households at a mutually agreed upon location. Street outreach workers will provide similar services as staff at emergency shelter. For other populations, youth, veterans, and households experiencing domestic violence, they may access entry point services at all entry point access locations, but there are also access locations specially trained to meet the specific needs of households in these populations. Workers at all access locations are able to connect households to these specialized locations, or access information can be obtained through entry point print flyers or on the entry point website, www.myentrypoint.org. This is the Entry Point poster. For print material, you may contact Entry Point staff to receive a poster with information about the call center and walk-in centers, or a folded card with all Entry Point access location information. On this side, please note where you can find the Entry Point call center phone number, the Entry Point website, and the walk-in center locations. The Entry Point website, www.myentrypoint.org, contains a wealth of information about accessing services as well as information for providers. We recommend that you take a few moments to become familiar with navigating the website. The following few slides will introduce you to important screens that help connect households in crisis to appropriate access locations. The Access page of myentrypoint.org lists scenarios of potential crisis circumstances a household may be facing, and then links them to the most efficient access locations to address that crisis. The Connect page of myentrypoint.org lists access locations and provides contact information and addresses. The Evaluate page of myentrypoint.org describes what type of assessment and services a household can expect at each access location. This will help prepare households for their visit. A comprehensive outreach strategy is an important part of making sure that our community knows how to connect households in crisis to entry point services. This strategy involves collaboration between street outreach workers at homeless services providers in suburban Cook County, as well as proactive outreach to community stakeholders that interact with households in crisis. Our street outreach workers collaborate as a wide team to enhance outreach to unsheltered households in a number of ways. Service mapping to ensure that we have coverage of the entire county and identify potential gaps in service. Participation in best practices trainings so that all clients receive fantastic care. The use of standardized documentation methods to ensure high quality services no matter where a household is assessed. Participation in monthly team meetings to foster teamwork and to support each other to do this important work. Cooperation with outreach workers from the Veterans Administration to ensure all unsheltered veterans receive care. The street outreach team also works closely with community stakeholders to enlist help identifying households that need assistance and connect them to resources through regular outreach glitches where teams of workers thoroughly canvass a region to inform community members how to connect households to homeless services, and ongoing community engagement through education about homelessness and ways community members can help end homelessness. We have mentioned that coordinated entry assesses households' need and matches households to housing resources by prioritizing those with the greatest need. We have also mentioned that many households resolve their housing crisis with minimal intervention. It is important as a homeless services system to understand the significance of these two statements. When we agree that we must prioritize resources for those households that are least likely to resolve their housing crisis without intervention, then we need alternative solutions for households who are unlikely to receive financial assistance. We need to create a culture of diversion and problem solving. Diversion can also be referred to as rapid resolution. So what does this mean? It means that we build capacity to support intake workers and shelter staff to have conversations with imminently at risk or recently homeless households about ways to potentially divert them from entering lengthy stays in homeless shelters before resolving their housing crisis. It is about dialogue and small amounts of flexible funding to support a household to preserve their current housing situation or make immediate alternative housing arrangements. Effective diversion includes conflict resolution with family members or landlords, and small amounts of creative, flexible financial assistance for items such as household groceries, employment counseling to secure that much needed job, or even transportation to relocate to live with support networks in another community. Diversion is not about solving a household's poverty. Diversion is not a refusal of services. Diversion is helping someone avoid becoming homeless while accessing their own internal and external resources to resolve their immediate crisis and then work towards safe, stable housing. With effective diversion, we can ensure that limited shelter resources are reserved for those who lack other options. We can also fully engage our local resources to support individuals and families within their own communities. We can support individuals to use their internal strengths and external networks to create customized solutions that suit their need. These continued strategies provide much needed housing-focused rapid exit services for all households assessed for housing and support services that are critical for those who may not receive interventions such as rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing. Diversion is necessary to prioritize limited resources for those households lacking viable alternatives, but it is not about turning anyone away. If at any time in the process it becomes clear that the household does not have a safe alternative to shelter, then emergency overnight shelter must be the safe choice. Once in shelter, staff can continue to have creative, housing-focused, problem-solving conversations with clients to limit the time spent in homelessness. Additional in-depth training is available for diversion case managers.